Clayton Larcombe, welcome to Mentor, mate.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be here.
Good to see you.
You too.
So I got to declare early that I have an investment in one of Clayton's businesses. We'll talk about it a bit later.
Mm-hmm.
So I just got to make that clear. And the reason he's here is not because I've invested in one of his business. The reason he's here is because he's got a really interesting story, and I want to talk about the sort of stuff he does. And we'll talk about it later. But I guess probably what interests me right now is you're a kid from Dubbo, Dubbo, country kid, and how you've done what you've done. You've done a pretty amazing job in competing against big guys in a very short period. So I probably want to go back to your country roots and tell me, for a start,
Sure.
I'd be interested. Tell me a little bit about Dubbo or growing up in Dubbo. I've been there a couple of times, but I don't really know the joint. It's a fairly wealthy town now.
It's a fairly big town. It's one of the biggest rural country towns in Western New South Wales there is. I didn't really see much of that growing up because I went to the zoo, Western Plains Zoo, that's there, and had a great upbringing, simple Dubbo Public School, and it was a great upbringing of sport, good family life, and it was a simple upbringing. I was fortunate enough, I have two older sisters, and they the plan was to do as much as schooling in Dubbo as we can, and then my parents wanted the opportunity to send us to a Sydney school for everything it has to offer. And I was actually, my sisters came to a school here, they were a bit older than me, and I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship. I went straight after primary school up to school here.
Which school did you go to?
To Scots College.
What was it like to become a boarder at Scots after you've been living at home with your parents in the country town Dubbo?
I was pretty homesick, actually.
Yeah,
I was really homesick for a while, and my parents ended up moving to Sydney a few years later when I sort of was midway through my high school career, but they moved to Manly, and rugby was and training was going late, and so I just stayed boarding because it made sense. So
Scots is a big rugby school.
Big rugby school.
Like, it's important for Scots, from Scots' point of view. Well, it used to be anyway.
Yeah.
Because one of my sons went there, but it's important to win. It's sort of like a gladiatorial thing, nearly, the way that the whole thing's set up. And, you get this Joe boys over there chanting and singing and the whole thing going on. You get the Scots boys putting it back to them.
Yeah.
It's like the Highlanders.
And Joey's are sent to the other side of the field, so you can't really hear them.
Totally. It's pretty cool.
It's actually
I used to enjoy going to those games. Yeah, but what is it? I mean, because I'm trying to get to the bottom of why someone like you end up doing what you do.
As I said, I was pretty homesick for the first year, and probably more than other kids. And I sort of felt a little bit, why do I feel like this? And my parents were there to support me. And I sort of ended up reaching out to a few older kids who sort of went through what I'd done. And I sort of found, I always sort of seemed to be friends with the older guys at school, whether I was playing rugby in a higher level or tennis or academic classes, or I just felt that happened. And I think that, I don't know if this made me where I got to today, but I was always pushing the limits. I was always trying to get in that upper team.
When you're in year 7 and you're homesick, you haven't got your mum and dad sitting there, and your older sisters aren't sitting there, and you're a boarder in Sydney, out of the country area, you're here with boys who are 17 or 18. Do you think a young man automatically sees mentorship?
I seeked it. I definitely seeked it because I feel like I needed it. I didn't really realize what I needed at the time.
Yeah.
And that sort of has been through all my career, which I'll touch on today, that I have sort of always been searching for that mentor side of things, even when probably we first met a year ago when I sort of asked you, can I come up to your office and talk to you for about certain things I'm doing? And I wasn't scared to ask for a bit of help, essentially. I needed to because I wanted that from
you're forced to some extent.
Sort of, yeah, like I sort of had to. But then I instantly became into this leadership role, which within my own peers. I always thought in my career so far that I've always pushed into levels of jobs through investment banks and trying to get trying to achieve certain levels. But it wasn't until I started my business about 3 years ago where I really had to step into that CEO role and have a business that started with 1 or 2 employees and now 15, 20. I actually really enjoy the learning part of it and teaching more than I ever thought I would. I just thought that I was my own, I don't mean to say it like this, but sort of my own talent in myself. I didn't think that I would enjoy teaching other people what I do as much as I do.
So would you say that you learned that leadership is about teaching and fostering other people's talents.
Yep. What I learned most is listening. I was never a good listener. I didn't think about that, but that's something that I've really tried to do a lot of.
Because in business, to run your business properly, you've got to be a fucking good leader. And to be a good leader, and everyone's got different ways to do it, but you've got to be, I think it's important to be able to listen. That makes a lot of sense to me. And you only learn to listen to others that you want to teach after you've learned how to listen to learn in the first place, which is what you were doing in year 7.
Yeah.
So after Scott's, what happened? What did you do after school?
After school, I went to Sydney Uni, fell in love with finance, played rugby for Sydney Uni played first Colts and then went to grade, but then tennis said come back and play tennis, so I played tennis. And I was never wanted to have a sporting career. I enjoyed it and it opened up a lot of doors for me, right? That's what it did. It allowed me to meet a lot of people, but academic and economics is where I really zoned in at uni.
When I went to school, I didn't have that thought in my mind, and I was good.
Rugby league?
Sport, yeah, rugby league school. But I remember there were other kids, like Graham Hughes was in my school, my class, and my side. And I remember when I was like maybe 15 or something, I remember him saying to me, saying to the class that he was going to have a career in rugby league and he didn't need to study because he was going to, and I used to think, wow, like I couldn't work that. I've never heard of any of that sort of shit. Like how could you have a career in rugby league? But he knew then that rugby league would provide for him a platform to have a career. And still today, he's got a radio show and he still does that today. And he knew that when he was 15. I didn't have any idea of that sort of shit. Like I just went to school, did whatever I did, play sport, did my study. I wasn't that zoned in on and able to articulate these things.
I never wanted to or thought that I would be a sports player, but I knew what did it do for me? Geez, it gave me great skills in a team environment, rugby, for example, to know how to be a captain of a team and have 15 guys around you to talk about strategy and navigate some guys who are down or nervous or scared. Like, those things are awesome things to learn at a young age. Then you've got an individual sport like tennis, which is just you on a court fighting against one guy for 3 hours to win. Like you are battling you and your head. Like, you are learning awesome things about yourself. I've always been a pretty good forward planner. I always I've got the next 10 years mapped out in my head right now. And I reckon I did then. I reckon I sort of knew that, geez, I'm learning good skills. And wow, this is going to give me a scholarship to Sydney Uni if I play first rugby. I never thought I'd go away and play. It gave, when I went to Hong Kong, which I'll touch on, I ended up playing in the first grade Hong Kong team, which enabled me to get a contact, which enabled me to get this job over there. So it opened up a lot of areas I didn't think were going to happen. But
when I think about I must have been just an instinctive person, just did whatever was put in front of me and I didn't really have a plan around it. But you must have been one of those other guys like Graham Hughes. I mean, you were one of those guys who wasn't instinctive. You were instinctive, but on top of that, you were purposeful. You knew. And I think in business, we've got to develop that. If we haven't already, we've got to develop those efficiencies. What happened after Sydney Uni? So your first job at JP Morgan, was that right?
Morgan Stanley.
Stanley, not JP Morgan.
So I applied for an internship. These banking internships are quite hard to get. 7,000 kids applied for this internships. I really wanted this one at Morgan Stanley. 7 interviews later.
How'd you know about it? First, how'd you know? You're at university. How'd you know about Morgan Stanley? You're a kid from Dubbo.
Yeah, because I studied the economics and commerce for 3 years at uni. And the banks come in and try and promote and the UBS talks and JP Morgan. And
did you go to those though?
Yeah.
I didn't go to any of them. I mean, I did commerce law at University of New South Wales. And they come on our campus, Deloitte's, everybody, Price Waterhouse, KPMG, Pete Mark Mitchell. I never went to one of those fucking things. I don't know why. How was it you were tuned into that? Well, was it the rugby union? Did the guys in your rugby union team tell you about it?
A couple of guys did, but I had 2 cousins who were on the trading floors of BlackRock, the world's biggest fund that manages trillions of dollars, and another cousin who was at Citibank at that time. And I looked up to these cousins. They were 10 years older than me, and I really wanted to be on the trading floors that you see, and it just hit a nerve with me that it was almost like a competitive rugby scrum that you see on the things there. But at the time, finance ticked a lot of boxes for me because it was fast paced. adrenaline. It was trading was that one that I wanted to go to start. Investment banking and like finance has it's a very wide funnel. So there's a lot of areas to start. And I just picked one, and I picked one. I said, rather than not knowing what I'm doing, but I said, I'm going to do trading. And I didn't stop till I got it. And then I've gone through many facets of finance to get to where I am today. But
So you started Morgan Stanley here in Oz?
yeah, so I applied for the internship, and this is an interesting one that I actually didn't get it. I actually got to the very last round, and HR called me on this Thursday and said, bad luck, Clay. Try again next year. You missed out. And I was devastated. So I got a bus in from Sydney Uni, and Morgan Stanley are in Chifley Tower. And the managing director who was the last interview, he said no to me. I waited on the couch downstairs from 9 a.m. until he came out to lunch at 12. And I followed him through the city, and he was with all his mates, and he went to the restaurant, Machiavelli's. He went down the stairs and down, and I was nervous. I was 21, and I was walked down the street for a while, and my legs were shaking, and I tapped him on the shoulder, and he was around this table with 10 of his mates having a Friday lunch, and he turned around and he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, I interviewed with you yesterday and I missed out. And he's like, oh, mate, try again next year. And then anyway, I said, can I get 2 minutes of your time? And he said, all right, 2 minutes. Put him to the side of the restaurant. And I said, I don't really remember what I said, but I said, essentially, you've made a big mistake. I'm going to be a trader for the Citibank, Deutsche Bank, one of the banks, but I want to be on your bank and your team. And he said, mate, gutsy, thank you very much. Try again next year. HR called me and said, he just caught up and said, I want that guy on my team, start next week. That's how it all started.
That's interesting. So you as a leap of faith, but you took a risk. It's a big deal. So Morgan Stanley, then do you end up in Hong Kong, Morgan Stanley?
Yeah, so then the middle of GFC hit and I moved over to Hong Kong. I wasn't a trader yet, I was a trader's assistant because you just spend time to do that. Middle of GFC, against all advice, they said, don't leave one of the world's biggest banks. And I moved over. I said, I want to be a trader. And I lived on my sister's couch. My sister lived in Hong Kong. My sister and everyone said, look, there's no jobs in Hong Kong. Like, it's the middle of the GFC, go home. And again, as I said, playing rugby, I met a guy who had a connection to a really senior person at JP Morgan. And I called him up Monday morning. I said, I'm Clay Larcombe. I've just arrived in Hong Kong. He said, mate, I don't know if you know what's happening, but it's the middle of the GFC and I fired 50 people yesterday. Jump on a plane and go back to Sydney. And he hung up. And then I called him back the next day at the same time. And I said, Mike, I called you yesterday. And he had a bad morning because he gave me a barrage of abuse. Don't you call me, bang. And I called him the next day at the same time. And before he said anything, I said, Mike, before you say anything, I think we got cut off yesterday. And he burst out laughing. He said, get in here at 4:00. And he gave me a trading job the next Monday.
I mean, is it just persistence?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's persistence. And I never thought that. And I still today people say, what if something doesn't work? Or I just never thought that it wasn't going to work. I never thought that I was not going to be a trader. And I would sit there and I was going to grind away until I get what I want. And not what I want, but I suppose I just believed in myself. Right?
But do you think it's also about being thick-skinned? Because a lot of people go, oh, fuck.
Yeah. I think that's a lot. I think that's come a lot from the rejections of everything, like sporting teams you miss out on. Or that first job that I got as that trader's assistant on those trading floors, like those guys that are the senior traders there are brutal. Like here's 10 numbers, call up and it was really intimidating. You would have to make cold calls all day to 95% of the time they tell you to piss off and smash the phone down. Like that you grow quickly in that and you care less and less about no and realize that it's just another number.
And it's a numbers game. So when I say thick-skinned, would you maybe another word that you would put alongside that word thick-skinned is resilience?
Well, I think persistence is the one. Well, that's my company today is called PAC Capital and it stands for 3 acronyms: persistence, ambition, and consistency. The 3 values I stand by.
Yeah. So
persistence is a big one.
It's funny. I used to carry around in I used to have one of those thick black leather bound diaries that everyone used to have before mobile phones came around. And I was given that by a partner of the law firm I worked for. He gave it to me because he had one. And I was traveling overseas with him and I was asking about it and he said he'd buy me one. He bought me one. And I still have that diary, but inside there was a little sleeve. And inside that sleeve there's a piece of paper. There is a piece of paper. And on the piece of paper, was a little saying which was typed out, which he gave me, and I tore it out, and it's about persistence, how important persistence is.
Oh, yeah.
And like he was, for me, the most brilliant lawyer I've met, and highly regarded. He's in his 80s these days, but I kept that saying about persistence. I don't remember the saying there, but all I remember is how important persistence is. And some people say, you should never give up. Well, maybe it's not about never giving up. It's not even thinking about giving up or not giving up. It's about just being persistent. It's about being as opposed to thinking about it. It's not a thought process. It's about just being a certain way.
Yeah.
You don't overthink it. Don't think, I'm going to keep calling back because, he or she will eventually say, no, I just call back. Just like you would call back at the desk, your person you report to probably gave you 50 calls a day, 50 names to ring, and that's what you did.
100%. And once you through that list,
give me the next list.
Give me another list.
Yeah, totally. So persistence and thick-skinned is what you developed, or resilience is what you develop, but it's because you're persistent. Your ambition is your thing. That's a bit of a driver that can give you energy, but the way you do it is you're always persistent, and it's not too much thought around it.
Yeah.
So off the back of that, you develop PAC.
PAC? Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Tell me what that is.
Yep. So after I went through Asia, I was there for about 6 years. I wanted to move back to Australia, where I was from. I missed Australia and wanted to move home. Came back and I didn't initially start PAC. I actually worked for JP Morgan, who at the time owned Ord Minnett, a stockbroking firm. Moved back and they said, well, don't leave, try stockbroking. Essentially, it was great, but it wasn't, as I said, I've been through every part of finance. And I always had the ambition after a while, Mark, that I ended up like butting heads with management a lot, like after a while. Like I think that most people were just like, why do you keep wanting to improve that process or question why is that done? And people have said to me over the time, I think you're just always bound to start your own business. People who are young entrepreneurs, probably like yourself, are always bound to do their own thing, and I was about 30 years old when I thought about starting my own business. 36 now, and 3 years ago I did it. So broke away and started PAC with, I had a bit of money in mind that I'd saved when I was in Asia, and I started to manage that personally, starting to invest in stocks I knew or different sort of thematics. I actually really enjoy the global macro piece. I actually enjoy trying to figure out what's happening with countries and currencies, and even though macro is really hard, I enjoy that part. So I started to asset allocate my money around the world, and wasn't a great deal, but it was enough to do. And saying that, I actually met a guy up on the golf course up in the Gold Coast, and he said, hey, if you're doing that anyway, can you manage a bit of money for me? And that was a few $1 million at the time, and charging a percentage fee under management, not any brokerage or anything. So I thought, well, this is a good deal. I can charge, it had a good residual revenue. I was charging, let's say it's 1 million, 1%, 10 grand a year, almost $1,000 a month, every month. As long as I grow it, it was good business. So started that 3 years ago with those three values I spoke about. And the consistent part that you touched on, that was something I wasn't good at. Like that was something I've had to really learn. Like I heard it from clients a lot. And as I said, I really try and listen. And they're like, you say you were going to send a report to me by Friday and I'd get it Monday. I wasn't consistent. If markets were good or bad, regardless, get your report on Friday, call me on Tuesday when you say you're going to, and never miss that. Yeah. That's something, being consistent is something I heard, something I'd
get a rhythm you can stick
to. And I wasn't like that. Like I just was, I'll get that back to you later. And people are like, that's not, you're managing money of mine. That can't happen. And I listened to a couple of really clients who were like, you have to change this.
And PAC standing for those characteristics. Yeah. PAC was formed, which is basically, not basic, but it's a managed fund.
Yeah. Now it runs full funds.
Yeah. And it's got, and you have sub funds and everything. And we'll talk after the break where you're investing this money. But how much money would you have today under management?
Sure. So I started 3 years ago with sort of 4 to 8. Now it's over 200.
200 million.
Yep.
So you have $200 million under management. You were 36 years of age.
In 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. And that's a pretty good outcome.
I had set goals, but I sort of said to myself, I want to get to 100 million in 5 years. And I want to get to $1 billion was my number after sort of 10 years. So I've hit my 5-year number.
And the performance?
The performance of the multi-asset funds are 12% over the last 3 years, which is, they're the sort of quite conservative 70-30 portfolios. So between 12 and 15%, depending on how much risk you want to take. And I'll touch on, I think today we're going to talk about the 2 other new strategies I'm doing in PAC and how I'm differentiating myself, which is the esports fund that I've done and the big innovation fund, which has been going this year. And that's up 40 and 58%.
Okay, so let's go to the break. We want to come back. I want to talk about those in reverse order. I want to talk about the big innovation fund first.
Yep.
So we go to the break. We'll come straight back. I'm back from the break. I'm here with Clayton Larcombe, and his main fund is called PAC. And we know what it stands for, but that doesn't really matter now. We want to talk about what it does. We know it's got $200 million under management. It's got a bloody good return. It's largely would have been for wholesale investors, though, I'd say. In other words, a sophisticated investor, someone who can invest more than $500,000 at a time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you like macro thematics. I mean, what's going on in the world effectively is sort of what attracts you as an interest. And I'd say when you then choose the things to invest in PAC, you've invested in those things, but you've got these 2 other initiatives going on now. And the one's esport, which is really cool.
Yep. So what happened was this. It started off PAC when I started. It started off with 5-10 families. It was almost like a family office for these families. And it just evolved in the fact that I wanted to, it wasn't that scalable. I could probably manage 15 to 30 clients, but it was had a ceiling, So that's why my business has changed, which I'll touch on. So what happened was 2 years ago, I didn't know much about esports or gaming. I didn't come from a gaming background.
Not as in gamers.
Gamers, I wasn't a gamer.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand what esports was. And esports is essentially electronic sports, and it's essentially competitive video gaming.
Yep.
People ask, where did you meet this company? And I actually met them in the gym. I was in the gym and they said, they started a company called, it was an esports company called Picklebet. And they said to me, Clay, we've just started this company. We know you manage some money and have a bit of your own. We're looking for a seed investor because we are using our credit cards and borrowed money from our dad, and we think it's a great idea. And I'm like, look, I don't run a VC fund. I've never invested in that. But I'll have a look at it.
But they're looking for venture capital.
They're looking for venture capital.
Startup capital.
Startup capital. They were startup capital, C capital. I spent it's about 3 to 6 months looking at esports and how big this was globally. And I started to really unpack every part of the esports ecosystem, which is not only eyeballs, generations, and how much money is going into the space, but I also looked at essentially, I spent a lot of time in Asia and how big it was there. And America is not as big as Asia. 70% of esports happens in Asia. But there's more eyeballs on sports and esports than normal sports now. So I'm like, wow, this is...
How do you mean? Like, give us an example.
Oh, so like essentially last year, more people watched Fortnite or Dota or World Cup championships through different streaming platforms, not actually in the stadiums because we couldn't because of COVID, but more people around the world watched esports than normal sports, NFL, rugby league. When I first was looking at esports, Tiger Woods won the Augusta Masters that year, 2019. He won $2 million in prize money. There was another show that I watched. It was the Fortnite World Championships, which is a similar event. 120,000 people in this stadium watching this
physically
final. Physically in a stadium watching. Instead of watching sports, they are watching two groups play against each other on screens, just like a normal sport.
Wow.
And the 16-year-old kid, Booger, who won over $3 million, more than Tiger did. And I was like, something's going on here. I got to have a really good look at this. And that's when it really kicked off for me, and I started to dive into it really hard.
It's even bigger now.
Yeah.
I mean, COVID's made it bigger.
Yeah, it's
like streaming, especially when it comes to, they're not going to sit in a physical
and it's COVID proof.
Yeah, totally. It's around the other way. Like because I'm COVID on board, I'm at home and I've got time, I'm going to dial into my favorite esport, wherever it might be.
Exactly right. But it also, for me too, hit another nerve that it wasn't just about the sport. It was a deeper social shift that was happening.
Tell me about that. I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
People were communicating. It was the next generation were not going down to for example, I said to a couple of younger kids that work for me, they said, "Are you going to watch the football game this weekend? Like, you're going to have a barbecue?" He's like, "We're going to have a barbecue, but we're going to go. We're watching the esports match on." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, and so just like we would watch football,
Yeah, like you would go to the rugby, and you watch Australia versus whoever, South Africa.
They were all having a barbecue to watch two people playing against each other in a controlled game in a match from different sides of the world. So they were controlling the team. Let's just say a soccer match, a digital soccer match, FIFA. One person was controlling the team who was sitting in Poland, and the other guy was controlling the team sitting in Prague. Like it was quite.
And they would watch that,
and they were just couldn't wait to see it, because these guys, they were like their heroes. Yeah, it was their heroes who were playing that game. It's for me.
It's like you're watching David Campese.
Exactly, but this
playing against the Barbarians or something.
But this is the difference that I realized after looking at it and hearing it. Even though I watch NBA, I know I'm never going to be LeBron James. I'm never going to dunk, never going to be that tall. But these guys watch these players and they relate to them. That I can be that person, because you're not bound by physical size. Anything, it's about how much you can move your control or your brain capacity to win. So what I'm saying is that people could relate to their heroes a lot more than what you do on a football field. I know I'm never going to be that big. I'm never going to tackle like that. But people can look at these gamers and be that gamer.
You're sort of like creating an avatar of yourself,
exactly,
and you become that gamer.
Yep.
That person or that individual in that basketball game.
Yep. Exactly.
It's sort of quite interesting. And I'm trying to work out what it is. What do you
because
think
they communicate too. There's this
how?
Well, okay. So what happens is you have this this community of people who are sitting at home who have a passion and love for electronic gaming. That they have maybe typically in their life been a bit of have not been outcasted for that love. Be at home, and I love Nintendos and gaming. You probably just stay at home and that they love their own time in their own room with their own game. But now, because of the evolution of Wi-Fi and communication channels and Discord and a few other channels, not only can they link up with people around the world and play and communicate, see each other through a virtual reality systems now, which that's the next stage. And then the metaverse, which is happening, where people are meeting up in these scenarios in the metaverse, playing a game as someone else against each other with someone else around the world. So you are linking up in a community. When I say that it's a deeper than just the electronic sports, it's more of a shift in the fact that people can log into these gaming systems, communicate with each other, find a community of friends where they all can meet up and talk about, as we would meet up and talk about rugby league or rugby union. They talk about an upcoming match coming up. But
do they do it as the avatar of themselves?
They can, but
are we going that far yet?
Or we're close.
Where they actually live in another reality in a parallel universe.
Yeah. Well, this is happening now. I'm actually going over to the States, hopefully to Miami, where that's all happening, and people are living in these VR sort of metaverse worlds.
They got the Oculus goggles on,
where people are staying in there for days at a time and are living in that world.
No.
Yep. So people are trying to get them out, and they eat, and the people want to live in there forever, like for a longer period of time.
It's like traveling to Mars, but not going to Mars.
Yeah, but you actually become that person.
You're standing on the but you do become the person, because in your own brain, your brain gets tricked into thinking that's the person they are in the goggles.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's another group that I'm meeting up with too, with part of the government who has looking at training for going into war, going into situations in their head where they go into battle. It's also going to hospitals where they look at maybe you have some disabilities where you put this on and be someone else and can walk, or there's a lot.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's fucking cool.
That is cool.
Like if you're not able to walk, all of a sudden you can walk.
You can walk, exactly. You see what it's like and feel it. And
or even that's fucking that's a super cool sort of it's a bit tangential, but like it's super cool.
Yeah.
I could talk about this shit forever, but let's just go back. Let's go back to Picklebet.
So could I.
So you went into Picklebet.
Yeah. So Picklebet started then. These guys,
the Picklebet guys,
Nick and Damon,
as a
the
betting
founders.
business.
It's an online betting business. It's a gambling business, which essentially allows you to put bet bets placed on esports matches coming up around the world at any one point.
So we're going to just get a head around this. So,
just like a sports bet.
let's say there's a, I don't know. Well, let's pick a new sport. Pick one for me.
FIFA.
Basketball, FIFA. Okay, soccer. Or FIFA, football. There's a FIFA match on, watching it, and I can have a bet.
Picklebet sets the odds.
So in your case,
Picklebet does set the odds.
So you're Betfair.
Yeah, exactly.
You're equivalent to Betfair, but in
bet.
esports.
Yeah, sports bet. But they, yeah, exactly. But we're offering odds for matches based on form and everything these players have. But Picklebet just tailors for esports matches.
So you invested in Picklebet. So where is Picklebet today?
I invested years ago when I first met Nick and Damon, who are the founders. They were doing $50,000 in turnover a month. And their margin was 10%, so they're making $5,000 a month. It was costing them about $40,000 a month to run the business.
So burning 35.
They had about 6 months left to runway, and it was lights off. And I spent time looking at it. In summary, I put up 50% of my wealth in that because I borrowed, and I put up 50% of the money I had in the bank and bought the largest shareholder of that company because I really did the work and believed in it. And fast forward to now, they were doing $50,000 a month in turnover. Now, last month they did $10 million.
Right, so it's a big multiplier. And you raised money?
I raised about $20 million throughout the course of the last 2 years.
Yep.
Through different stages. I was seed, and then what happened was this: that investment. Like as I said, I didn't run a VC company, and I didn't want to put my clients' money in front of this. If Picklebet didn't work, my money goes because I wasn't building a VC company.
Yeah.
The only time when I opened it up to the next stage was when Picklebet started to make material revenue, and I knew they went to Series B, like along the chain, and then it just went to a pre-IPO stage because getting ready for listing. So only then did I call my clients and say, here's an option for you. And I gave them the option. And so now PAC owns 50% of Picklebet. Just finished on that percent. Obviously, I had esports running through my veins and blood, and I knew the space for years. And I thought, well, how can I'm understanding esports so well in the listed world. And I thought, I'm talking to esports companies every night around the world, every night. And I thought, wow, like I can actually use all this knowledge that I know in the listed space and build out a fund that is purely investing in companies all around the world that are focused on trying to make revenue from esports, which is nothing to do with gambling. It's just mainly about
it's not like Picklebet. It's not setting wages. No, it's about investing in esports businesses,
companies. Yeah, around the world, which is between 10 to 15 companies. None of them are involved with gambling, but that's not a problem for the fund. That's not focused on that. But yeah, it's companies like Nintendo, EA Sports. It's companies like Tencent. Like some of the biggest companies in the world that are esports focused. And I sort of was able to use my skills, just like I would unpack BHP's balance sheet. I can do the same, but for a company in Sweden or the NASDAQ, which is esports focused, and really, give people access to it.
So it's bringing product to the market, which a market would not otherwise have. Yeah. But it's all packaged up. It's curated.
Yeah. Curated.
And is managed and assessed regularly.
Yeah.
Like a person like me, for example, I don't know where to find information on this sort of stuff. I don't have time to find information on this sort of stuff. But you package together. It's a bit like someone might do this for crypto. So someone might bring a package of crypto.
Yep.
For me to invest in, and they then decide which crypto they're in and out of.
Yeah, exactly.
So like a managed fund for crypto.
Yep, exactly.
They might have a bit of Bitcoin, they might have a bit of Ether in there, they might have a bit of all the various other ones. I'm curious about them. May not ever have the opportunity to, or the time, or the bandwidth to work out what these esports companies are. Yeah. So give me an example of some of the esports companies that are in this particular. What is the fund called, by the way?
It's the PAC Global Esports Fund.
Yeah. PAC Global Esports Fund is available for retail or just wholesale?
It's actually, that's a good question to ask. Over the last year, originally when I started it was only open to wholesale only, which means you have to have more than 2.5 million in net assets or make more than 250 grand. It's a funny classification, but I found a disconnect. I found the fact that people who qualified as a wholesale investor, it was the wrong demographic. It was the wrong market. It needed to be someone who I do some speakings and mentor programs at Sydney Uni. And a lot of the kids like, can I put $500 into your fund? And I said, I can't, you're wholesale. I'm wholesale only. Yeah. So over the last 9 months, I've worked with ASIC and
that's the regulator.
That's the regulator to make sure, because they have to go through to make sure before they give you authority to run a retail fund, they have to go through that you're a reputable manager and have the process in place, because you then have the ability to manage to people in someone's superannuation who has $100,000 in the super to be able to put in your fund. It comes with a lot of responsibility, and it was 9 months for a reason. So now, as of January, my retail fund will be open to anyone to put a minimum of $1,000 into the fund. Before it was $25,000 minimum and wholesale only, and now they're all open to retail investors.
And so, just in terms of returns, like what is that fund sort of showing? So
that's
far?
done 40% this year, 39%,
40% increase
return, and the innovation fund, which I'll touch on, that's done 58%. I really want to do something different. I really wanted to. When I started the esports fund, people were like, "Esports? What do you mean? Like you just." That's not a real sort of sector, and it's been a year of having to stand up and talk about it. Now people are taking notice with the returns of having and also how big it is. But this is all part of a theme that is innovation around the world. It's things that are disrupting or improving a process. It's like it's growth. It's things that are affecting cars, electric cars, lithium, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, blockchain. These are all areas that I get excited about and spend all my nights and days looking at and trying to find the next opportunity to invest in. And that's why I broke away and started. There's the esports fund and then there's the innovation fund. Now, the innovation fund has esports in it because esports is an innovation topic. I think innovation is not as big as esports fund right now because it's a bit newer. But I think innovation will be the blue chip sort of gold part of PAC, because it has about 10% allocation to esports, artificial intelligence. It has an allocation to blockchain. You can't avoid that. It is an innovation topic that needs to be addressed. And so essentially they are both running similar themes. They're a global fund that has 15 to 20 positions, all in that innovation theme.
And how much money have you attracted into that innovation fund so far?
In the innovation, it's like 4 million, but
right.
the
it just kicked off
20.
The esports, 20, and your traditional PAC fund, the first fund is a couple $100 million.
That's about 180.
It's interesting.
That's about 180, but then you've got the venture capital funds where all the PickleBet sits.
Yep.
And now because PickleBet is about to go to listing, and PAC owns 50% of that, and that's now valued north of 200 million, that company.
Right. So it's sort of interesting, though, that you started off with your traditional family office, more conservative, more probably defensive, or looking for a return that's better than bank return.
Yeah.
You know, like, and then you've slightly gone, I don't want to say down the curve, because actually the curve is actually showing you far better returns than your traditional stuff, I'd say. But you've gone down the curve in terms of awareness, what people would ordinarily invest in. And it really, I mean, maybe what your game is, if I could summarize it, is that you're bringing to the broader community, now retail investors, access to, through your platforms, products, investable products that they would not ordinarily able to get access to. And you're curating them for them, and you're managing them for them. You're finding them, or your team's finding them. And you'll bring him to the party. It's funny you should say about the university students. I find that people under 30 are far more open to, in fact, not open. They're looking for innovations.
Looking for it.
They don't want to invest in, with the greatest respect to banks or BHP, whatever.
100%.
They're not looking for the defensive 5% returns, fully franked. They couldn't give a shit about it. They want the growth.
It's the last generation that will ask, how much franking credits does Commonwealth Bank shares pay? Or even though it's really important, how much dividends? I reckon that passing of wealth down to that next generation, they won't ask those questions again because they're looking for.
Well, tell me something, Glad. Like, I mean, we're going to run a short time, but I mean, what would you say to somebody though? I mean, I know you're not a financial planner, you're not out there professing to be a financial planner, etc. But just generally, I mean, would you say to someone, if you've got $100,000, would you say to them, allocate 50 grand towards innovation fund or your esports, and then the other 52 your traditional stuff? I mean, how would you go about it if you're
okay, let's look at the way I've set PAC up, right? Every dollar that I have is in those three parts of PAC. There's the PAC multi-asset, which is the superannuation money.
Yeah.
I have super money that's all in those portfolios. Then I've got the PAC innovation funds, esports funds, then I've got the PAC private. So the three factors where every dollar I have is in those three funds. So if I had 100 grand, I'd say, well, keep it diversified and structured. Keep 50% in the big global multi-asset. Have some fixed income. Have some offshore exposure. But you can also have some exposure to 5% to these innovative themes of esports and blockchain and crypto, cybersecurity in different areas. Like, we are not investing in companies that are they're not startup companies. These companies are billion-dollar companies. They're just as big as some of the banks or miners here that they're in. So they're not just little companies.
And you're not saying, Mark or Jess, who's under 30, say, Jess, you're not saying to her, go and you pick your own stocks. You're investing in a fund where your team is picking all the stocks. So you're getting some sort of level of diversity and variation and diversification as well, so that you're not taking too much risk on any one particular thing.
I reckon if you went into those three funds, and I would say you'd have 5% allocation to something private. Take something that means something to you, and maybe you need like a VC manager for that, which I'm not there yet for that, but I will be. There would be 500 stocks to 1,000 across those portfolios. So you are well diversified.
Yeah.
So you are not just buying a bit of BHP and a bit of Commonwealth Bank and a bit of Facebook, the stocks in overseas. You are buying indexes which hold 500 companies, S&P 500 or ASX 200. Like, you are covered with 700 stocks there. So you don't think you're diverse.
And what's your ambition from here?
My ambition from here is
because that's A out of PAC.
Exactly. 2022 is going to be a big year. I've just actually in the middle of moving into a pretty big office space in Macquarie Street. I always seem to bite off more than I can chew, and I chew like hell to get there. And this is a 300 square meter office space. There's 15 of us, so I believe in my growth. I better. So that's that part. I feel like my team's going to grow, and we've got a really good year ahead. Picklebet's going to be listing this year, either in the ASX or the NASDAQ. All my funds go retail now. All my funds are now open to retail investors.
So anyone can invest as long as you got $500.
Yeah. I have a really clear ambition while we're here that I think those two active funds that I talk about, the innovation fund or esports, I really have a clear ambition that I want those funds to be eventually one day go to what's called an active ETF. So by what I mean is ETF or exchange traded funds are essentially, you can buy one stock on the stock exchange and get access to multiple stocks within that. So if I want access to the ASX 200 companies, an ETF you can buy on the stock market, buy one stock, and it'll give you access to those 200 companies. Everyone that I speak to and hear about, this younger generation that we speak to all the time now, whether it's through the Picklebet side or just my own interest, everyone has a CommSec account. Everyone is buying stocks on Superhero. Everyone. But no one, it's really hard for them to buy units in my fund, because you can't just do it on the app. That's something I've got to work out, how to get those guys access to that, which at the moment, if I can turn my fund into a stock, everyone has access to buy stocks on the stock market. So they can get access to my esports fund. They can get all the holdings in there, and they can just buy like they're buying a stock on the stock exchange.
And I think what's important there is that you allow the people under 30, then there's much more liquidity. They actually can trade the stock.
Yeah, they can get in and out
through CommSec or wherever it is, through their account.
Really low broke cost for them.
But right now, how would you do it? Right now, if I'm a 25-year-old person, I've got a bit of spare cash, I want to go into one of the funds.
Yep.
How do I do it? Where do I go?
Okay, now they can. There's an application form in the back of the document, which is on my website.
Yep.
They have to fill that out.
What's the website called?
It's www.paccapital.com.au.
Yep.
That's where they fill out the application form, but then they get access to a portal where they can view their holdings. Every day gets updated to know how much.
Sort of like a wallet.
Yeah, it's like a wallet, but it's still a bit of a disconnect. I want
Yeah,
that
yeah.
wallet to be inside a bigger platform, which is,
yeah.
you know, I just climbed a mountain to get to retail, and I know there's a big mountain behind to climb now, and I'm just ready to do it.
Well, mate, I know you're young enough, and I've been watching you for probably 2 years now. You've done everything you said you were going to do,
Thanks,
and I think you're doing some really interesting, cool things for a younger generation who are just dying for this sort of stuff. But I would say to the older generation, my generation, start fucking listening to this sort of stuff because you can't play defensive your whole life.
Yeah.
I know one thing. If you're ahead of the game in any game, whatever it is, rugby union game, regular game, you start playing defensive, you're a big chance of losing the game.
Yeah. Spot on, yeah.
You've got to stop playing defensive all the time.
Yeah.
Don't protect your lead.
Yeah.
You start protecting your lead, you're taking a risk.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think, oh, if I protect my lead, I'm actually being risk averse.
Yeah.
No. Equally, by protecting a lead, playing defensive, you are taking a risk as well.
That's a good point.
And that's something really important for my generation to think about.
That is important.
And I know the younger generation don't think that because they've got less. They're not playing defensive. They've got nothing to lose, so they might as well fucking play offensive. Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Good fun.
that's dangerous for people like me to look at that. So I would say to anyone who's, I would say to anyone who's playing defensive, have a think about this and think about your allocations.
Yeah.
Clay Larcombe, good luck. I hope you get overseas. I hope you get your test so you can get on that aeroplane.
Yeah, thanks.
But mate, very good luck. All the best to you. And
thanks, mate.
And I hope 2022 you kill it.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it. And thanks for everything. Thank you,
mate.
Thanks.